Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our launch of this month's Jewish Disability Awareness and Inclusion Month for the UK. Tonight's evening is brought to you as a partnership between Hampstead Garden Suburb Synagogue and Norwood, and we're going to be hearing from a number of experts in the field who have dedicated their lives to inclusion. And I invite our participants of this evening's panel to join me. Tonight, I welcome Rabbi Dovid M. Cohen. Rabbi Cohen is the senior relationship specialist for YACHAD. YACHAD comes to us from across the pond, the Orthodox Union, which is kind of the equivalent of United Synagogue, the Orthodox Union of Synagogues of North America, the modern Orthodox body of shuls, has a division called YACHAD that works for inclusion, works for those with special needs in the Orthodox community. And Rabbi Cohen will be addressing us this evening, telling us about Jewish Disability and Awareness and Inclusion Month activities in North America, and some of his personal stories of inclusion. We will then hear from Deborah Gundle, who is the founder of JWeb. Now, Deborah has dedicated her life to inclusion activism, and her latest project is the JWeb Accessible Siddur, so that those with special needs can also enjoy the Shabbat service. And of course, our partner in this evening's initiative, Dr. Bev Jacobson, the chief exec of Norwood, very familiar face to Anglo Jewry, and particularly to the Hampstead Garden Suburb community. It's an honor to partner with Norwood this evening, and it's an honor to have you all here this evening. So, without further ado, we are going to begin the program with Rabbi Cohen.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me at this program. It's nice to have a chance to speak across the pond. So, as my good friend Rabbi Friedman mentioned, I have the great privilege and honor of having very close exposure to individuals with disabilities, with special needs, both in terms of my professional role at YACHAD, at the Orthodox Union, but more primarily as a parent of a 15-year-old young man who has Down syndrome. My wife and I were blessed. Our very first child was born with a disability, and it was unexpected, and we were thrust into this whole world of terminology and services, and it really opened our eyes and our minds and our hearts. And I've written extensively about this topic over the years, and it's something that I am quite passionate about. I'd like to share just a little bit with you this evening, if I may, some of the experiences. My son's name is Yedidya, and I'd like to share some of the experiences that we've had with him in a synagogue setting in particular that have really been transformational, not only for him and our family, but also for members of the broader community that have had the opportunity to engage with him and participate with him in services. In truth, Yedidya is a very sensitive soul, and he very much enjoys being part of the communal service. And this has been from a very young age. I was a rabbi of a synagogue on the Upper West Side of Manhattan for about a decade, and that's really where Yedidya's very young and formative years began. And even at that early juncture, he would come to synagogue, he would come to shul on Shabbat, he would put on a special talis that we had for him, and he always very much enjoyed kind of emulating the praying that he witnessed around him. As Yedidya began to mature, so we moved out to the Five Towns area of New York about 4 years ago, and we actually celebrated Yedidya's bar mitzvah in our current congregation Or Torah in North Woodmere. And it was kind of a little bit nerve-wracking for us because we were rather new to the community. And here we are, we're making a bar mitzvah, not just for, it would be nerve-wracking if you were making a bar mitzvah for a typical child in such a new setting, but we were making a bar mitzvah for a special needs child. And I can tell you that Yedidya and my wife charged me with the task of training Yedidya for his bar mitzvah, that like any other child, he should have a role to play, that he should do something meaningful that made sense for him. And we actually, what we did, based on a nice suggestion of a friend of my parents, is that his bar mitzvah sedra was Parsha Shlach. And the last verses of Parsha Shlach are all about the tzitzis, that which we recite every day, the final paragraph of the Kriya Shema that we recite on a daily basis. So Yedidya and I, for about 9 months, basically pounded away, and it's not no pun on the British pound, but we pounded away, and we worked diligently on those 6 verses of the Torah that he was able to commit to memory, and that he was able to articulate, and he was able to share with the congregation. And he actually got up on the Shabbat of his bar mitzvah 2 years ago, and he laned the Torah beautifully. And I can't even express in words how impacted and how moved everybody in the community that participated felt. It was, some said it was the most inspiring Shabbos they ever experienced. And when we made Kiddush after shul, there's about 7 or 8 surrounding congregations in our neighborhood. I wouldn't be exaggerating to say that almost every single person in the broader community walked over to wish Mazel Tov and to participate, because they appreciated and they understood that this wasn't a typical bar mitzvah, and that for us, we had to put a lot into it, and for our child, and it was very, very meaningful to get that communal support. As we've progressed, and Yedidya over the last 2 years is now bar mitzvah, it's incredible how he's so passionate about synagogue life. He doesn't miss minyan. He's often in shul before I am, which the congregants get a kick out of, that the son of the rabbi is always preceding the rabbi to synagogue. And they truly, really, people are inspired in terms of the word I'd use is his slavus, which translated means his passion, his enjoyment. You know, we all work to be engaged and excited about the prayer service. For some of us, it's easier, for some of us more difficult. But when you watch a young man with a disability who comes on time, who davens fervently, who aspires to lead the congregation in prayer, who we happen to be Kohanim of that tribe, and we get the first aliyah to the Torah. And Yedidya, he loves to get called to the Torah. He loves to get an aliyah. And sometimes, like in the smaller minyanim, like in Mincha, Shabbos afternoon, where it's a smaller crowd, so often there won't be a Levi present, and he'll get to double up. He'll get the Cohen and the Levi aliyah, and he's like high-fiving people in the congregation. That he's like, awesome, I got 2 aliyahs, etc. So I think what's been so beautiful about the communities that we've merited to be members of and play a role in is that the community has really embraced our child. Often at times, and it's no fault of people in the community, they might be uncomfortable with a child who looks different, who maybe sounds different, who maybe can act out at times, etc. And we've been fortunate to be surrounded by really caring and patient congregants who've always kind of embraced our child and really made room for him and enabled him to have, again, when it makes sense. Like my son sometimes overdoes it, and he wants to lead all of the prayers, and frankly, he's not capable at this juncture of articulately and clearly leading the prayer in a way that I would be comfortable with. And I often have to fight him to kind of chill out and give other people an opportunity. But at the same time, the members of the community have embraced him and are welcoming and are warm to him. And it's something that's really transformed his life. He really feels like he has a place in the synagogue. So much so that even on a weekend, if I'm away and he happens to be home for Shabbat, like he'll go to shul on his own even, and he'll feel he has his place, and he feels like he could give the speech in place of his father, who's the rabbi, so on and so forth. But I think it's a crucial message. If I can, we have a brief amount of time here, but I just want to communicate the idea to those that are participating and listening who may hear about this subsequently, and that is that at the end of the day, like we all set the tone in our congregational life. And it's not only individuals with special needs. Strangers come in, again, pre-corona. It's a different world that we live in today. Hopefully we'll go back sooner rather than later to kind of what we were used to. But the idea being that anybody who comes to a new setting, a new environment, and they feel like they don't know people, they may be uncomfortable, and often we want to set a tone in a house of worship as a place that's welcoming, that's warm, that's inclusive, that there's really room for everybody. It doesn't matter kind of what your hashkafa is, what your religious outlook is. If you're in synagogue because you want to pray and you want to participate, so we want to make space and room, a safe space for everybody that's interested in that. That includes individuals with disabilities. And I just want to convey that people in the community have they can make such a beautiful impact by just welcoming, just being warm, and just kind of being a little more tolerant and giving people a little bit more space, particularly the people that need, additional support. So it's something that can transform a family. I think people that know our family here in New York understand that, Yedidia is a very, very essential part of our family. His siblings adore him. He's often considered the favorite sibling by his siblings. And it's really a tremendous blessing to have a child who's a little bit different than our other children, but at the same time brings so much richness to our lives and to the life of the community. And it's my bracha, it's my blessing that people should get to know individuals that maybe look a little different or sound a little different, but at the end of the day, they're really no different than anybody else, and they have very, very big hearts and very, very big souls. And they, not only can we give them tremendous richness and enhance their life experience, but it'll boomerang back to us and also give us tremendous amount of satisfaction in providing context for those who need to participate in communal life. I'd love to hand off now to the next speaker. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for that. I'm also, my son is Zach. I run a network for people with learning disabilities, their families and carers. And my son Zach is 26. He can't talk, he can't walk. He's very difficult to engage with. And I hope by the time I finish speaking that you'll understand how easy it is to include even someone like my son who's difficult to engage with. So I wanted to share with you a joke. My life with Zach reminds me of a Jewish joke, and I wanted to share the joke with you and explain how that joke resonates with me. So the joke is Sammy Cohen. Sammy Cohen's at home. There's climate change. There's been a massive flood, and Sammy goes up to the roof of his house to get away from the rising flood. The flood is rising. He's living in a small town. A group of youngsters come by in a rowing boat, and they say, they know Sammy. They say, Sammy, come down, come and get in the boat. We're going to take you to safety, to somewhere dry. Sammy looks at the guys and he says, no, don't worry about me. Hashem is always looking after me. Hashem is going to save me. You go ahead, you save other people who need saving. Don't worry about me. Hashem's going to look after me. So after much persuasion, the youngsters disappear off in their rowing boat. And Sammy Cohen is left alone on his roof. The water's rising. Then suddenly there's a thudding sound, there's a noise in the air, and the rescue helicopter comes. They let down the rope and they say, grab onto the rope, we're going to rescue you, we're going to take you somewhere dry, and we're going to take you to safety. Sammy Cohen looks up at the helicopter and shouts up at them, no, save other souls. Hashem is going to rescue me. I'm okay, you save other people, Hashem is going to look after me. Trying to persuade Sammy Cohen, he won't come. The helicopter flies off. It's cold, the night goes on. By morning, poor Sammy Cohen finds himself in heaven. And he sees God and he says to Hashem, what happened? You know, I'm a good Jew. I observe all the rules. I'm kind to other people. You didn't rescue me. And Hashem says to him, well, what did you think the rowing boat was? What did you think the helicopter was? And that's really how I feel about my life with my son. When my son was born, I thought he's an innocent, lovely soul. How could this possibly happen that he could be born with such difficulties and that life was going to be so difficult for him? And then after time, and it took a long time, so I felt badly about religion, and I turned away from my religion at that time for quite a long time because I was so upset that this could have possibly happened to him. But then I learned over time that actually our religion and the Jewish religion and our practices give him a life. He goes to synagogue. On Friday nights, we do candle lighting. On Shabbos, he goes to synagogue. At the moment, not on Shabbos, we have a Shabbat film that he watches. All the Jewish festivals. He can't make friends. He can't because he can't talk and he's difficult to engage with. But he goes along to synagogue. He's joined in with everything there. People say hello to him. He's actually quite a sociable guy. He loves it. Judaism gives him a life. And so I learned my lesson from that. So part of what I wanted to talk about really is how easy it is to include people. And the lesson from an experience I learned when Zach was about 12. I used to keep Zach away from activities, from friends, and from going out, because he has behavioral problems. He grabs things, he makes funny noises. So I never joined Zach into any social, any life. When he was at school, when he was about 12 years old, his teacher invited his whole class, all with severe learning disabilities, all with inappropriate behaviors. She invited her class to her wedding. And I said to her, thanks very much for inviting Zach to your wedding, but he's not going to come. And it's lovely of you to have invited him. And she said she was upset, and she said, well, why won't you let Zach come to my wedding? And I said, because he's got such inappropriate behavior. I'm scared he's going to ruin your special day. It's a very important day for you. And she looked at me, and I'll always remember it because it was pretty amazing. She looked me in the eye and she said, Deborah, I know who I'm inviting to my wedding. So I said, fine, he can come. Thank you very much. But I'm gonna bring him. And the reason I took Zach to the wedding was because I was worried that he was going to have inappropriate behaviors, and if he did, I could take him out very quickly. So anyway, we went to the wedding. The whole class went to the wedding. The whole class behaved completely inappropriately. Lots of noises, getting up, moving around. But the wedding guests and the bride and her husband welcomed them and joined them in with everything. And the whole experience was pretty incredible. They didn't ruin her wedding at all. In fact, they enhanced her wedding. And the fact that she welcomed them and her guests welcomed them in the way that they did made the whole thing so much more beautiful. And that is when everything changed for me. And I stopped excluding my son from things, and I became extremely passionate about inclusion. So through my network, before the pandemic happened, we were running community events, inclusive sing-alongs, inclusive work enterprise scheme, and my son was going to this inclusive synagogue service, which is absolutely marvelous. And there are lots of ways that you can include people, but mainly my message really is to say, whatever you're doing, whatever event or activity or community that is happening, just welcome people unconditionally. You don't have to do anything special. And I think the big thing that a lot of people don't understand is that research shows 7% of our community has learning disabilities of one form or another. So what we don't actually realize is there's so many people tucked away, and if you look around your community, they will emerge because families keep them at home, worried about inappropriate behavior. And I hope that as we begin to look around and welcome people unconditionally, more and more people will emerge and we'll all benefit from it. So I just wanted to mention a quote from Rabbi Lord Sachs as I finish off and before I hand over to Bev. And what Rabbi Lord Sachs said, he says, the message of the Hebrew Bible is that civilizations survive not by strength, but by how they respond to the weak. Not by wealth, but by how they care for the poor. Not by power, but for their concern for the powerless. What renders a culture invulnerable is the compassion it shows to the vulnerable. So social isolation, moving on from the quotes, social isolation is not new for people with learning disabilities. People with learning disabilities are used to being isolated. They're used to being left out. They're used to not being considered. They're used to not having friends. And they're used to people in the street turning away from them. If anything, the COVID experience now shines a light on what isolation feels like. We've all had a little taste of it. And what I hope from this conversation and the discussion we'll have afterwards is that everyone will understand that it's so easy for us as a community to build on the changes that are being slowly made by other communities who've started to be inclusive and more inclusive. Inclusion is easy. It's basically just include people, welcome them, think to invite them, look for people learning disabilities, find out about them, invite them to whatever you're doing, and whatever you're doing, either whether you're setting up an event or you're participating in an event, and welcome them unconditionally. Thank you. Bev.
That was really beautiful. Thank you, Deborah. I'm also going to talk about my own experience and how I came to work in this field. And my experience, my feeling is that the difference between social isolation and inclusion is very, very small. There's a tiny thin line between it. But on the one side, social isolation is an experience of doom and gloom for people, whilst inclusion actually brings warmth and opportunity. And the ability for us as individuals to help people out of socialization and into inclusion is so easy, and it's so transformative. That's the thing that excites me and wakes me up every day and gets me doing the work that I do. My experience of this is different from Rabbi Cohen's in that we lived for the. I'm also brought into this world through the birth of my daughter, who also happens to be 26, and we for the first 24 years of her life lived in one community in Boreham Wood. We moved there as young immigrants to this country, thinking that when I was 5 months pregnant, a good place to be was in a community where there were lots of young families, and that would be a way we would integrate. When my daughter was born, her birth was pretty traumatic, and she was on life support, and it was 3 weeks before we came home. But we'd only been in the community for a short time, so we were completely below the radar. And we didn't get a warm welcome. We didn't get warm meals sent to our house. We didn't get messages from anybody in the community. We were left on our own. When we started to venture to shul when she was younger and we went to the children's service, we used to go week on week. But I can tell you that so often we sat down in chairs at the children's service, and the chairs on either side of us were always the last ones to be filled. When it was time to start nursery at our the school that was located on our shul premises, we had months of planning, and a teacher specially planned to be with our daughter. She lasted 2 days there, and they told us they couldn't cope with her anymore. And so our lives contracted. We turned in on ourselves. We became our world became our very small family. And we didn't have a community around us, and we were very, very fragile at that stage of our lives. Roll on a number of years, and I was trying to work out tonight as I was thinking about this, when it all happened, and probably around her bat mitzvah time, I would say. And a couple of things made a big difference. I think one of it was that I had finally come to terms with what I was dealing with. I was far more confident. I was coping far better, so probably I related to the world differently. But at that point, I also started to value my daughter and see what she could do rather than what she couldn't do. So when it came to a bat mitzvah, I started to think about, well, how were we possibly going to even approach an idea of a bat mitzvah? As a family, we had decided that each member of our family would try and do a fundraising venture, just to raise money for all the wonderful organizations that had supported us. And I was completely taken by surprise when my daughter turned around and said, well, what am I going to do? And I had not even conceived of the idea that she understood what we were talking about, nor that she could do anything. But we had the most incredible fun. We landed up having she did a triathlon over 3 kind of Sundays, where she ran a mile one Sunday, swam a mile one Sunday, and rode 10 miles on her big disabled trike. And she managed to raise £15,000, and the power and the impact that had on everybody around her was staggering. And every single year since then, she turns around and says to me, what are we doing this year to help other people? And I was trying to work out, I think she's raised somewhere between 100 and 200,000 pounds through all these endeavors that she's done. More than that, though, was we also started having bat mitzvah lessons, which at the time seemed ludicrous to me. But the teacher was amazing and managed to navigate her way through some sort of bat mitzvah curriculum, in a way that was accessible for my daughter. And she loved it. Structure for her is everything. And Judaism presents structure. She's very black and white. So suddenly she was saying brachot for everything. She became a true little Rebbitzin. And as part of that, we planned for her to say a Devar Torah just at a family tea. But when we met the rabbi just before her bat mitzvah, he said to us, why don't we let her say it in shul? And she did. And it was the most remarkable experience. She won over the shul that day. And that experience just opened up the community's heart to our daughter. And from that moment onwards, she had the most incredible life that revolved around the shul. she used to love to come to shul every week. And there's some standout moments for me. One of them being when she was about 15 and she heard that there was a youth service. She asked me if I could take her to the youth service. And I did so grudgingly because I was scarred by that feeling of sitting in the back of the room next to her again, as I had been in the children's service. And I thought, well, now I'm going to be doing it forever with a group of teenagers. And I sat down reluctantly. And after a short period of time, one young 16-year-old came up to us and sat down next to my daughter. And she turned to me and she said to me, "You really don't have to stay. I know where you sit in the shul. I'll look after her and I'll bring her to you afterwards." And that day for me was like the most meaningful day ever. From there on, she had the first ever friend of her own, a peer that was, we were joined at the hip, my daughter and I. She never did anything independently of me. This was the most remarkable experience. And then shortly afterwards, we were introduced to the beautiful Rachel Cass, who was a young woman who's just a couple of weeks younger than my daughter. And from the age of 16, Rachel visited us every single Saturday afternoon. And those two became incredible friends as well. And it just opened up a whole new world. And since then, my daughter has just been embraced by the community and enjoys such a rich life. She's living on her own, independent of the family now in Golders Green, with support around her all the time. But it's the community that give her life richness. She's lucky to enjoy Shabbat lunches with lots of people. Lots of families host her every Shabbos in non-COVID times. And she's got such a wonderful group of volunteers who've become true friends. And even now over COVID are doing all sorts of wonderful things to connect with her. And she's got a baking session this week. She's just got a really good life. And, we couldn't be more grateful. When the point is, though, that the work of turning social isolation to inclusion, it doesn't happen naturally. You can't just throw people in. It comes with training and with opening people's hearts and minds. I once took my youngest daughter to a park when she was just started school, and she was 5 years old, with a whole group of friends. And a group of adults with learning disabilities arrived at the park at the same time as us. And they got out of the vehicle that they were in, making a lot of noise, flaying hands, behaving as some people do when they can't communicate. And the girls I was with all started giggling and pointing. And my 5-year-old daughter came and whispered in my ear and said to me, "Mummy, I don't think my friends understand about disability." And I looked at these children, and what I saw in their faces was complete fear and anxiety. So I called them aside and I started to explain to them why people were behaving as they were. And what I saw that anxiety and, turn into compassion and understanding and relief, actually. And I realized at that moment how important it is to educate people, because I know that those young people who had that experience with me will be able to embrace people with learning disabilities after that experience. And so that's what I'm like passionate about. I'm passionate about getting people to understand that message, just as all the other speakers have spoken about. When you talk about accessibility, it's not about a ramp at the front of the shul. It's about an open heart. It's about reaching out. And so, because this is Learning Disability Month, for people listening to this call, think about just one little act that you can do that can maybe, further this idea of inclusion. It's a bit more difficult now that we're in COVID, but things that you can do is, if you know of anybody who is living in an isolated setting, pick up the phone this month and give them a call, just see how they are. The other things, we're at Norwood are running lots of sort of, we run a Connect Together program where we're getting volunteers to connect with buddies, or to run sort of bingo sessions or singing sessions for groups of people with learning disabilities. And we'd love to have people join in our volunteer program. And those are just some of the things that we can do. When the shul is planning, forever, the wonderful social impact exercises you do, go out there and let's find a list of all the people, because the people who come to shul aren't the ones who are socially isolated, obviously. There are a whole hidden group of people, and what we should try and do is go and find find them, find people to buddy with them and get them included in the programs that we're running in the shul. The worst thing in the world is when people set up special things for people with special needs. What we're trying to do is just give them access to becoming part of the community. And that's our message tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Cohen, Deborah, Bev, for those inspirational words. I feel humbled here before three heroes of mine. You guys are really so inspirational to us all. I'd like to open up the floor now to questions to our panel. Those who are watching us, if you post your comments in the Facebook comments section, please do post your questions. We can see them. I want to take a moment just to thank Edward Howard, our wonderful community director, who is in the background, making sure that this is all working so smoothly this evening. Thank you, Edward. And I see Livia Sugarman has kicked off the questions this evening. Thank you, Livia. Livia asks, how is Tali coping with lockdown and not having the same interactions?
It was the hardest part was the lack of structure in her life. She lives by structure. So what we did was we created a new program for her, which it enabled her to have a structure to be able to kind of plan her life around. What was very, very difficult was there have been times when she's been denied access to the family, and that's been incredibly hard for her to cope with. But we've been fortunate because she lives in a single setting. We've managed to obviate that for most of the year. So I think people adapt far better than the experience at Norwood throughout has been that everybody's adapted in far better ways, and the thing that's been really good is it's got the care staff that work with the individuals that they're looking after to become far more engaged in a very active way than they would normally, because they're having to use a lot of initiative and creativity in finding things for people to do. And that's been very helpful. And technology's been amazing. I mean, we have just found the most incredible ways to allow people to communicate with them. Even nonverbal people, are able to communicate with families, and the types of programs we can put into homes is phenomenal today. So it's been a very good learning experience. But what we don't want to do is especially in when we're running care homes is overuse technology. So because it's really important that when COVID is over, that we get all our people back into the community again in a very real way, rather than through technology.
Thank you, Bev. Do Rabbi Cohen or Deborah, do you want to speak to some of the challenges that your own children or the other special needs members of the special needs community that you are helping dealing with during COVID?
Well, I can't help but just highlight how amazing support workers and carers have been risking their lives every day. Like, my son is in supported living with two other Jewish young men, and the care team who look after him have absolutely been truly amazing, risking their lives, and in their minds, their lives, because they're watching the news all the time. The news is on all the time in the house, and they've been pretty incredible. And actually, nice opportunity to just state how much I admire them and how fantastic they've been.
Yes.
Just along the same theme. So the organization I'm affiliated with, YACHAD, so how the staff pivoted and began offering kind of on-demand online programming for this population during the pandemic, and continues to do so, is really something that is transformational. And even to the degree that members of our team would go meet with people in backyards, or bring them special gifts, or actually purchase for our members special technology so they could stay connected. Connection is so essential for every human being, and particularly for individuals with special needs who may anyway feel excluded or not as socially connected. to then have to go through this terrible pandemic, it's really a population that I think really has suffered during this difficult time in terms of our own personal situation. So my son happens to love, technology. And if anything, thankfully he's doing amazingly well. And even when he was in seclusion and couldn't go to school because schools were locked down, or even when there were additional kind of lockdowns or things of that nature, our only concern was that he's overdoing it on the technology, in a sense. He loves to watch, fun games and shows and things like that. We were just worried a little bit that he should actually have some education, kind of in there. So in that sense, technology is a wonderful blessing. At the same time, you don't want it to become a crutch and preclude these individuals from having the social interaction that they really would thrive and need.
I'm just going to add quickly to jump in. This is also about creativity and innovation. It pushes you to find different ways and different things. And just as an aside, which I think is quite amusing, my son loves horse riding and horses. And in the 1970s, they had exercise machines that mimicked horse riding. So I went onto eBay and bought very cheaply a horse exercise machine. And he found out that he absolutely loves watching horses on the screen, sitting on his horse exercise machine. Wow. Which, if it hadn't been this, I'd never find out. I'm joking, but actually, this has pushed us all. It's challenged everyone and pushed us to find different ways and be creative. And we're going to use that energy when this is over to bring our children back into the community, back into life, and re-engage with them. Actually, it's not just us. We're all got to learn to re-engage.
Right.
And make an effort.
So, Bev, you spoke about some of the challenges coming into the kids service versus the youth service. And I don't know if that was a function of the particular people you were dealing with, or the age, or yourself. But Angela Roscoe has asked, and I'll really address this to whoever wants to speak to it first. Do you feel attitudes have changed dramatically from years ago to now to disability?
Well, yeah. I often can't believe when I think back that I never met a disabled person before I had my own daughter. And I keep trying to think, how did I grow up in a society that there were no disabled people? Obviously, there were disabled people. They just weren't out and about like we see them today. So that's been a massive change. I had an experience once a couple of years ago where I went to a closed down mental asylum in Liverpool. And it's one of the few places that catered for learning disabled people, and it's still in its original condition, because the building is waiting for planning permission to turn into some massive new development, and so it's still in its original condition, and in it are these just rows and rows of cot beds that children slept in, and there are those ECV machines where they were doing shock therapy. And my heart just ran cold. I was thinking, like, how can anybody have put people in this situation? The thing that almost killed me was when I walked out the door and I saw a sign on the wall that said that this institution shut in 1998. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, that wasn't that long ago. And there's still 2,000 people in this country who are still living in hospitalized settings like that. And the government has been trying very hard to move them out of that, but has not done very successfully in that. And people aren't aware of that. But we have come such a long way so quickly. But there's still a lot further to go. And there are pockets of communities and within the Jewish world where people are far more progressive than not. But what I tend to find is that people who are open to experience and take a risk, it just changes their thinking completely. We've run employment programs before where people will think they're doing us a chesed by giving somebody a job, shredding paper or photocopying or something for £5 a week, or it's just a voluntary to cover their fares or whatever. And after a while they'll suddenly be asking, all their friends will be bringing somebody else in, because the impact that these young people have in their businesses, where they're teaching other people to look out for others, teaching patience, teaching, it has such a ricochet effect. It's just unbelievable. So, and that's really exciting.
I'd also add, I mean, work opportunities for people with learning disabilities is growing and growing, and that's extreme. I think that's really extremely exciting. Also, there are that I know of. We've just brought out this inclusive Siddur for people with learning disabilities, so that they can access the service easily. We have found, while we were putting the Siddur together, there's 8 synagogues in the UK at the moment who are running special inclusive services, which is for people with learning disabilities and anyone in the congregation to go to. We are saying that you don't need to do special things for people with learning disabilities, and so that's not always the case. But these 8 synagogues who are running inclusive services, I think that's a marvelous thing, and I hope that that's going to grow and grow.
I think one of the things that I think is a great idea. Bev spoke earlier about making sure that we're not simply making programs and separating learning disabled people, which, and Deborah's thoughts just now on the separate services. Rabbi Cohen, maybe you'd like to share with us some of the peer-to-peer camps that the Orthodox community have in New York.
Sure, it was a great opportunity. Thank you. And before I get to that, I just want to comment on some of the previous things, if I may. Just anecdotally, in terms of the progression and the evolution of dealing with individuals with special needs in the Jewish community, I can just share that, like my predecessors, like people my parents' age, so people of the previous generation who had children with disabilities, when I would interact with them or meet them at kind of the retreats that YACHAD would run, these family weekends that we used to have pre-COVID. So they'd always say to me, like, you don't realize how lucky you are. Like when we were starting out in your shoes as young couples, like there was nothing compared to what's available to you today. So something that we're very grateful for and appreciate. And the founder of YACHAD actually often used to say that although we've come so far, there's still a ways to go. So I think that's always kind of a balancing act. And finally, on the point of employment, the Rambam Maimonides famously comments in terms of the hierarchy of charitable giving, that providing somebody with a job is really the greatest expression of charity, of tzedakah. And I think that something that we've been very effective with at YACHAD here in New York is job training for individuals with disabilities and trying to provide opportunities so that they can have gainful, meaningful employment and have meaning in their lives. That's a beautiful thing that I think many people can do. Many people have businesses, and there's all different types of jobs that need to get done there. And, it's just a question of like kind of opening up one's mind and realizing that sometimes an individual with a disability could actually fulfill the job in a beautiful way, and it would be mutually beneficial. In terms of Rabbi Friedman, in terms of your question regarding the integrative summer camps, so that's something that we're very proud of at YACHAD. We have approximately 30 different programs, camps both in the United States as well as in Israel, where our model is integrative. In contrast to many other great organizations that run exclusive special needs camps, we don't do that. What we actually do is we go into typical camps and we take a bunk or 2 or 3 for special needs kids within the broader framework of a typical camp. And of course, they have additional counselors and staff, and they have some programming that's unique to them. But ultimately, we at YACHAD, the word YACHAD means together, and we're very much believers in the integrative model of inclusion, that our orientation is not so much to service individuals with disabilities kind of, vis-a-vis their own issue, but rather to try as best as possible to integrate them within the typical community. And that's twofold. That's A, because we want our members to function within society, but B, we wholeheartedly believe that the typical community has so much to gain from having these members within, in summer experience and other frameworks. And I do a lot of fundraising for our programs, and I'm a spokesperson in that regard. And I love to basically pitch or to sell to donors. Not every donor cares so much about the particular needs of special needs, but I try to inculcate within them that when they support our programs, they're not just supporting special needs individuals, they're actually supporting typical kids, typical high school kids that are going to grow in leadership roles in the Jewish community. And they have to appreciate and understand that their investment is actually helping sensitize these typical kids and help them become leaders and help them become more sensitive and deeper thinkers and make a greater impact on society at large. So there's a much broader scope here than just the narrow needs of the special needs individual, there's the impact that has on the broader Jewish community as a whole in terms of enhancing and improving it.
That's amazing. I'm going to bring a question or a topic from the chair of Norwood, Neville Kahn, who has asked, given that learning disability often comes alongside other medical vulnerabilities, how is the learning disabled community being prioritized for vaccines? Maybe Bev, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually been appalling the way the learning disability community has been treated as far as this is concerned, because the government has prioritized into different groups, and learning disability is actually in group 6, which we haven't even come to yet. You know, and the figures to date are that people with learning disabilities have got a 6 times higher death rate in COVID than have their counterparts. And I'm talking about learning disability without any other illness. The difficulty is that so Down syndrome is considered priority 4. So they would have got a vaccine by now in the UK. And some people with who were asked to shield would have also, if they've got complex medical needs, would have been higher up on the list. But because people generally are living in group homes, they're just lumped together as learning disabilities. So that distinction hasn't been made clear enough, which has been a big problem. The other problem is that most learning disabled people don't live in registered care homes anymore in the UK. They're living in supported living, and they're still the same profile of people, but the access to vaccines in supported living has been much lower than it has been into registered care homes. So it's very difficult. But I think a problem that's much greater in this country at the moment, this very minute, than the learning disability problem is the postcode lottery. And there are parts of the country that are getting access to vaccines at much higher rates than other parts of the country. And so it means that in areas they're already going down their patient loads and giving much younger profiles of people vaccinations than in other areas. We've had a huge problem in our Ravenswood village, where we've got over 100 people living, and most of them are over 50 years of age, so really quite old in the learning disability community. 65% have comorbidity, so they all should have had the vaccine by now, and we just haven't been able to access it. This week is the first week that we've got the local surgeries coming into Ravenswood to vaccinate our cohort, which has been really, really difficult. So it's a sensitive subject, and we've been advocating as best we can for it, because it's really important that they get vaccinated.
If I could just mention, here in the United States, so obviously there's been a lot of reports. I don't know how much people pay attention or not, on your side of the pond, but certainly there's been complications with the rollout of the vaccine, and certainly there seems to be a dearth of available vaccines. Hopefully that will improve and change quickly. But I do think that in terms of the special needs community, there definitely is additional vulnerabilities. A few of my son's peers in school, one of them actually tragically passed away from COVID. Certainly, there's a heightened concern with the special needs community vis-a-vis COVID, as there are any other vulnerable populations. But I do think you have to be a certain age. I think you have to be 16 years old to get the vaccine. But I think they are prioritizing in the States right now individuals with disabilities. My son is only 15, so he's going to have to wait till his birthday. He'll turn 16 in June. But if he were 16 right now, I do think he would get priority for the vaccine. So that's an impressive thing and something that we're thankful for.
Right. So Batya Ivry Friedman asks, probably wearing both a personal and rabbinate hat. She says, those who are attending the shul programs already feel included to some extent. How do we ensure that we find those who are secluded or have been excluded and make sure that they too feel welcome?
I would love to answer this. So what quite a few synagogues have been doing, which is very successful and really nice, and I can help anyone who's interested in this, is running inclusive themed Shabbat weekends or Shabbats. And I think that that's quite a nice way to sort of raise awareness and to let people know that they are welcome. And again, I'm going to go back to our accessible Siddur, because what we will be asking, and what we are asking synagogues to do, is to find out who in their communities has got learning disabilities and to give them a copy of the Siddur so that they know they're being thought about and that we care about them. And also to keep copies of the Siddur on your shelves. So like anyone else who comes to synagogue, the Siddur's on the shelf, they can access the service and they can belong. If the synagogues put the accessible Siddurs on their shelves and people come in and they see it, it's a great signal already to know we care about you, we're making it possible for you to access the service just like anybody else. So I think the starting point really is to maybe have a Shabbat themed Shabbat, and that just opens the door saying, hello, we know you're there and we're interested. I don't know.
I think you also just got to ask the question as well, because the community is so well integrated and connected, that one person will know another, and generally people with children with learning disabilities find each other. So when you kind of hook into circles of people who know each other or know how to access other groups of people within the area. So there are ways. You've got to do a bit of digging.
And the truth is, there's so little opportunities. If somebody makes an opportunity or says, hey, yes, I'm interested, we'll come.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being an inspiration to us all this evening and throughout your lives, both personally and professionally. You've really all dedicated your lives to making this world a better place. And we all owe a debt of gratitude for our society is so much the richer for all of your efforts and others like you who are doing incredible work to make everyone feel equal and included and part of the community and part of society. And we've seen things move along with great strides, and may we continue to move in the right direction. May we end this pandemic soon so that we can all gather together, no matter who we are, everybody united, YACHAD, in shul together, enjoying one another's company, looking out for one another and learning from one another, knowing that everyone has so much to offer, no matter how one looks or sounds. Thank you, Rabbi Cohen. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Bev.
Thank you.
And thank you for introducing Jewish Disability Awareness and Inclusion Month to us and bringing it to the shores of the UK. We'll make a real big splash of it next year for sure, even bigger than this year.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.